And welcome to Catholics Coast to Coast. This is a great spot for your week as we get caught up on what's happening at Podcast Central. Great conversations to deepen our walk with God, especially through the Advent season. So as we dive in, of course, remember to find us or find the shows that you like and then subscribe to those and follow them wherever you like to stream podcasts so you never miss an episode. I'm Ace McKay. Glad to be a part of the ride with you as we spotlight this week one of my favorite podcasts, the Bea-Atta Dudes. These guys are hilarious, and this week they're welcoming Catholic speaker and evangelist Manny Gonzalez, and he's talking very candid from a heartfelt opportunity to not only talk about his identity, but struggles and suffering and God's mercy in his life. Manny shares his powerful journey facing same-sex attraction to a dramatic encounter with the Lord. So let's dive right in with the Bea-Atta Dudes on this week's Catholics Coast to Coast.
Hey y'all, this episode of the Bea-Atta Dudes deserves a disclaimer. This is just as funny and as lighthearted, but also as serious as all the other episodes of the Bea-Atta Dudes. But we tackle some tough topics with our friend Manny. And we just want to make sure that if you have little ears around or you need a heads up, this show does talk about sexuality. It talks about same-sex attraction. It talks about feelings of despair. And so just a disclaimer before we get going, buckle up for the Bea-Atta Dudes.
We did have that conversation, and it was weird. It was awkward, and it was hard for me. But I think what I really appreciate about their approach and what I would encourage is that it was, though, however, a one and done, where it was kind of like, I knew where they stood after that conversation.
Yeah.
I didn't need to then constantly be reminded that they thought I was in a sinful relationship.
Right.
Yeah. And I think where I find that some parents will come to me with is they're like, I don't get why my kid doesn't want to talk to me. I mean, every time they come to my dinner table, I'm reminding them that they're living in a sinful relationship. But I don't know why they. And now I'm kind of like, I mean, would you like it if every time you sat with someone, they were like, hey, just a reminder, you're actively sinning.
The Bea-Atta Dudes! Hello, Bea-Atta Dudes! Welcome back to another fun Friday episode of The Bea-Atta Dudes, a podcast for Christian men seeking to grow in holiness by living out the Beatitudes as men in this world. So just some dudes following the tudes. My name is Paul Kolker, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Nick Besner.
Blessed are the meek.
That's it.
Amen.
And Jeffrey Scheffelbein.
Blessed are the me, too.
Okay, make it about yourself. And we're back.
That was Beatitude and Beatitude.
There you go. Yeah, here you go.
Holiness and humor.
The balance.
That's right.
Well, we're back in studio with none other than Manny Gonzalez, and that's Mannyy Gonzalez.
Manny. That's
on
right.
Instagram.
Stretch it out.
Yeah, welcome back.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for part 2.
Yeah, part 2. This was great. So if you missed the Monday episode, it was phenomenal. We heard some incredibly raw, open, just sharing, and so yeah, go back, listen to that. It's a powerful episode, so feel free, check that out, share it with a friend.
I learned a lot.
That was
you.
really powerful, and just the focus on God the Father, I thought, just really shone through the whole episode. It was really powerful.
You had me tearing up.
Yeah.
Praise God, man.
But speaking of God the Father, we want to talk in a particular way towards fathers out there who may not know how to answer questions about same-sex attraction.
Or even approach the conversation.
Yeah.
Totally.
Well, and I want to emphasize, too, because you said, this is how I said it back then, but is the proper nomenclature, or the kind of the better way to discuss it as same-sex attraction? Am I getting that right, or what's the...
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a controversial discussion to have in general when it comes to the ministry space, because you'll hear different answers. My approach is I ultimately say I'm sexually attracted to men. You'll hear same-sex attracted. You'll hear, some will say LGBT plus experience. I have, or we minister to people who have LGBT plus experiences because it's a broader, maybe not just same-sex attraction. Maybe it's, attractions to both, or maybe it's struggle with gender, where then it's, under the T. So right. You'll hear a variety. I think what ultimately comes down to is just that we all know that we're sons and daughters. I think our belovedness is foremost, where I would emphasize. And then in terms of the language people use, I mean, I tend to either say sexually attracted to men, or I'll say, people with LGBT plus experiences. But,
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. No, that's
very helpful.
That's a good clarification.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely.
Do you find grace when people get it wrong? I
find
said
what? I'm sorry.
wrong. Well, like if somebody's trying to be, it's like trying to speak Spanish in Mexico and you're trying your best.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that you have to be when it comes to this. Like, I think that I say we have to meet people where they are. I think I would be hypocritical to not meet individuals where they are in the church, especially if they're well-intended. You know, I think most of us are just trying to understand. So.
You had a big cry fest with your folks whenever you shared your news with them, and they had a better understanding of why you were in such a long stage of acting out and burning down schools and stuff.
Not churches.
Didn't have
Not churches.
No, never burned down a church. Just
Schools. That's right.
No, he never did that.
Right.
He just got kicked out of them.
That's right. That's right.
But like you had this very emotional cry fest with them that I'm sure led to lots of ups and downs and hard times. But I think what we wanted to maybe circle around is like, speaking to the fathers out there.
And it took you years to get to that moment, right?
Yeah.
Like you carried something around for a long time.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm.
That's right. What advice, or do you ever have fathers that reach out to you, or people that are concerned because they're not even sure where to start asking a question because they have maybe concerns, but they don't even have facts on their own son? Let's just stick with the dudes out there.
Yeah, totally, with the Bea-Atta Dudes. I think all the time I get asked. I think to affirm you, for starters, parents out there watching, fathers out there watching, it's totally relevant, you know, and it's totally normal and understandable to kind of be sitting here as a father and be like, I need to talk about this, but I don't know how, you know, feeling awkward, feeling weird. Like it's sensitive. It's for some people uncomfortable, you know, and so I just want to acknowledge that as we're going into this, that you're valid if you feel that way. I think, you know, I have numerous things to speak into that. I think for starters, and maybe we could just kind of piggyback, but for starters, I think that's why as parents, I think one of the things that I find with a lot of Catholic parents is that they're afraid to even like, almost like we're not going to talk about it. We're never going to bring it up to our kid. Like almost this mindset of like, ignorance is bliss kind of, which
let them make the first move.
Right.
Or is it like it'll just go away if I never acknowledge it?
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I just think that a lot of the reality is, I guess what I'm trying to get at is that this is relevant to like your kids are going to at some point, and like it's just the reality of
at least have questions.
Yeah, they're gonna have questions.
The culture, I mean, it's out there.
Totally, they're gonna have questions, and so the reality is they're gonna have questions. So I think as Catholics, as especially fathers who are being trusted to steward this family, to the spiritual head, I do think it's important that you are willing to open the space to have these conversations, or even to like if they get to a certain age, to eventually just have the conversation of like I think of one family I know where their kids saw like a gay couple on the cooking show, and the parents then took it as opportunity as like, okay, we need to sit with, and so they did. They sat with them and they were like, hey, this is what we believe as Catholics, you know, and there's an emphasis on, again, like the human person is good. These people are loved. Like they're not any less. They're made in the image of God. But like, at the same time, we have to acknowledge like we don't, as Catholics, believe that kind of a relationship, two men or two women, you know, romantically pursuing each other is in alignment with God's design. You know, obviously they translated that in a way that was appropriate to the preteens, but nonetheless, the reality is I think it's going to come up. So you have to be A, willing, and then B, I think, just like open to the idea of like, that these conversations, like you need to be the one who's ready to equip them and just educate on what the church teaches, on what we believe. Again, human dignity, chastity, all these things, so that they then don't otherwise look to the world for answers. Because the reality is if they're not going to hear from you, they're going to look elsewhere. And then you look at what the world has to say about this, and it's totally, you know, or I should say primarily opposite of what we believe as faithful Catholics. And so, I just think like almost being a step ahead.
Even what the world says that Catholics say.
Yeah, totally.
Then all of a sudden you would hate the Catholic Church because you're like, oh, this is terrible. It's
misconceptions
bigoted.
about
and you're
the
like,
church.
let's actually know what the church said, but you learned it somewhere else because mom and dad weren't willing to enter into the difficulty.
Totally. And I think this goes for a variety of topics. This is why I think it's at the parents' discretion, but nonetheless, I think all Catholic parents should be at least open to stepping in. I think it comes again with the variety of the topics. When it comes to, I think, forming our kids on the foundation, I think as they're growing up, knowing their body is good, that, you know, human sexuality is good, all these things, so that when these topics, these more sensitive topics come up in that umbrella, there's already a foundation of like, you are good, the other is good. But then on top of that, you can then, I don't know, I think there's a beauty in these parents that I've met who are just free to like, they've talked with their kids about like the warnings against like pornography, against, you know, masturbation, against like, because again, if they don't hear it from you, like they're gonna, like, it's sad, but I think I saw this statistic that said like, what what was it like at this age, the average age for kids being exposed to pornography, I think for girls it was like 10, and then for boys it was like 8. So at this point, it's like kids are like, I mean, if you're thinking your 15-year-old doesn't know what this stuff is, it's
and
like,
even stuff that's not considered just old normal, right? Like hardcore, terrible stuff.
Yeah. So it's like, I think we need to get out of our, this mindset that our kids are, we're a Catholic family, so our kids have no idea what this stuff is. Like, we can do our part, for sure, limit technology, limit social media access, but the reality is, like, eventually, especially in their teen years, like, they're gonna come across, or they're gonna have classmates or friends, like, and so they gotta be equipped with, at minimum, what the Catechism has to say about this, what the Catholic Church teaches.
Okay, so I have to share kind of a funny story. I mean, sad in the sense that it's in line with what you're talking about a little bit, but I can remember one of my classmates when I was in 3rd grade. He had older siblings. And so he was already at school starting to like talk about birds and the bees type stuff. And I mean, I know this is, this might be for sensitive ears, so maybe kids shouldn't be listening to this part. But he leaned over and he's like, "Hey, do you know what a condom is?" And me thinking I was so smart because I had been on vacations to South Padre Island, I said, "Yeah, it's a place you stay when you go to the beach." Wow. That was a condo, but yeah.
Oh my gosh!
But
I got it and I laughed, and then nobody else laughed. So I was like, "Oh, I guess this is serious."
I'm learning. I'm actually just soaking it in.
No, because in my head I was like condominium.
Yeah, no,
right?
makes sense. Yeah,
like,
the innocence of you were just like, you didn't.
But
think
I was innocent, and he was like, "No, man, that's not it." And I was like, "Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure." And I think I even said like, "I've stayed in one." And like,
I've
stayed in one. Yeah, I mean, it even goes to like this past.
You can't stop that stuff from entering though.
Well, that's what I'm getting at.
Everybody has that classmate who had the older brother.
Totally,
I did.
I mean, I don't know if you guys like this past weekend at the 4:30 Mass at St. Anne's, Father Allen started talking about IVF at the 4:30 T Mass.
Oh yeah, I was there for that.
And I was like, I was talking to my parents about it because we were kind of like just like discussing our thoughts, and I said like, because at one point, I'm not saying my parents did this, but at one point amidst the family conversation, it kind of came up like, was that appropriate for? And I was like, honestly, like to a degree, I was like, I'm kind of glad we had a spiritual father, authority figure of the church got up there and said what the church teaches about this, because these kids are I was like, Mom, like they're gonna hear about it, like. Especially if you're going to public school, this is in your sex ed class. Yeah. Like this is being promoted, so you need to be equipped with like what, especially from authority figures like priests, or like we need to hear people and callers who represent the magisterium being like, this is what we believe, and like we're going to stand firm with that. So I think when it comes to this, as fathers, I do think there's a beauty in just opening. At the minimum, I think this also comes to just fostering a space with your kid where they know they can come to you. Like just fostering a space where, a safe space in the sense of like where they know they can that dad is there to receive them wherever they are. And I think that's really important as dads. What that looks like for you is, between you and the Lord. But I think that's one of the keys is like fostering a space that your kid knows like, okay, if I do have whatever that might feel or seem out of, what seems like the ordinary that I hear from, like, I can come to dad and ask him questions about it, I was reading through one of the Chastity Project postcards on my desk from a year and a half ago, Successful Fathers Conference. It's just been sitting there. And I was getting ready to put some just different filters on the computers because my kids are getting older now. And it said, do not wait to have the talk, have thousands of them. And I thought that was such a cool perspective. Like, that's cool. The talk acts like you check some just box. One. Yeah, that's really cool.
And I think my wife did such a great job of studying theology of the body, so she had a context of all the human person and the beauty of what God has given us in all these gifts, and then that foundation gives you something to build off of.
Yeah, I think that's the richness of TOB in general. Theology of the body is so focused on dignity and like gift, like each as gift. And I think that foundation especially helps with our understanding. Because I think it goes within general, the church's teachings on every morality in general. If you just present as no's, list of no's, like that's not going to land. Like that's not, there has to be foundation of like, it's about love. It's about deeper yeses. It's about receiving and reciprocating the gift. Like it's all like, we have to set these foundations and frame it in a way where the kid can see like, okay, this is because I have a God who loves me and I'm loved and the other is loved. And so I'm responding that way. Obviously that's a very abstract idea that, it's easy for me to say, but like,
No, but that's powerful because you're hitting on the full picture of what's going on. It's not purely just, oh, well, sex outside of marriage, bad.
Yeah.
Right? Which, I mean, obviously we want to, I mean, I'm not saying that that's good, but I'm just saying like there's a whole bigger picture to saying, oh, okay, well, here's why, because sex is so good and it can result in another person and right. And so you want to do that in a context that's safe. And that's when two people have vowed to protect and stay with each other. Right. Like you build this larger picture instead of just shaming the behavior that you don't want.
Totally.
Right. You emphasize I mean, everything I'm hearing you say is that you emphasize the good and you provide a space for asking questions about why it's good and all of that.
I mean, even when it comes to the church's teachings on this topic, I mean, that's a lot of where my heart is, like affirming like that those are image bearers too. Like at the end of the day, these individuals, like they're brothers and sisters in humanity. Like there's like, you know, and like there's a response to love here. There's a response, like we're all like each day we're responding to love, and this is, you know, an invitation to love in itself. And so it's like, yeah, I really think it is the way we frame these things. And even that sounds like kind of manipulative. It's not even framing. It's just
no, it's like
acknowledging
full context.
Right, acknowledging the reality of like what it is, like you said, its fullest sense, and not just giving the gospel like almost like doing a disservice to the gospel of just picking like, oh, Jesus had rules. It's like, okay, but that's not what this is about. Like that's not the reality of, you know, that's not the full picture. You know?
Jesus said, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly, right? So what's the way to have that abundant life?
Totally. So, yeah.
This is probably too big of a topic, but I've struggled at times where there's people who are trying to get my kids to think a way that is counter to church teachings, but they're very close to us. And I'm having to find ways to like distance this, but love somebody. And I'm like, this is so mixed up. Like it sends a mixed signal. And some kids aren't old enough to understand that mixed signal. So you're just like, how do I navigate this? Yeah.
Yeah, it's
interesting. It ain't easy.
Well, it's interesting because you're going to hear mixed opinions when it comes to, I think, the pastoral approach in general of, like, let's say, for example, like our kids and their uncle who has a partner who's a guy. You know, like how do we integrate, like how does that look, you know? And you're going to hear, you'll hear all kinds of opinions. Like some people will say, let the partner be involved at the holidays, let the partner, you know, but just make clear to the kid where you stand. Some people will say, no, like they're not allowed anywhere near the house. Kid has no, you know, so you're going to hear all kinds of opinions. I think this is where as a parent, it's important as a father to take on that leadership role of like, digesting for yourself different opinions, you know, spiritual director, taking it to prayer, allowing the Spirit, and then ultimately like you have to say as
and
lead.
I think you should have that conversation with your spouse long before you face like you got to practice before you get in the game.
That's right.
Because you don't want to be sitting there fumbling over a bunch of like, what do you mean? Well, I thought we do it like in front of everybody. That makes everybody feel awkward.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think this is where then as husbands, you know, like father side, like as husbands, it's important to sit with your spouse and really just like understand each other's heart in these areas because it can lead a lot of places.
Beyond being just like a good listener, like what else did your parents do kind of in that moment or thereafter that made you like, oh man, like they did, you know, I'm sure there were things they struggled through, but like what are some of the positive takeaways or things that maybe somebody listening could learn from?
Yeah, I think one of the things was, Jeff, are we good on time?
I have to go, but that's just weird to do to your podcast guests. I was going to write it on this notepad, this Tiny Saints notepad, and I was like, I'm just going to write it really small.
Yeah. I could like sense. So should I just answer this real quick? And then
and itwill be weird. Like they'll shut down. I'll give you, here, wait, why don't I hug you before the show's over?
Yeah.
It's good to see you, Manny. Thanks. Come here.
Good to see you, man.
Thanks for doing this with us.
Dude, absolutely, man. No. Absolutely.
I've been excited about doing this for a long time.
Dude,
Thank
praise God, I'm glad. All right, so, that was good. This is raw. This is good.
So this is how it works.
This is how it works. This is beautiful.
This is life.
Nick and Paul.
Right,
we'll see you tomorrow, Jeff.
It's not the only time I've ever left. I went to
loves.
a doctor's call and just walked off.
That's true, but that would,
Make sure to include the 7 loves for both of them. I love for both. Not just, you can't exempt Paul.
I'm going to give you the 7 loaves.
Thank you, Manny.
7 loaves. You're welcome.
I love you. Loaves of bread.
Loaves. I get it. I got you.
Not loathing.
Loathing. That would be bad. Wow. I got it.
Wow.
I'm going to write a book about loves and loves.
Loves. Yeah, careful there. Yeah, it sounded a little mincy word there. But so I think going back, so my parents, there were several things that I I actually include a lot when I give guidance to parents and whatnot. One of the things is, sorry, I have ADHD and I see Jeff pushing buttons. I'm getting distracted.
I'm showing Paul, like, if you just press
button?
any one of these
It's the
buttons
red
here,
one. Yeah.
any
Okay.
one of them will be a nice closeout song for you.
I got it. I'm on it.
I love you guys.
Love you
What
too.
a strange ending to a show.
Dude,
And we'll
praise
see you in the Eucharist.
That's how it goes. Bye, Jeff. Yeah, I think one of the things, at least, this is like, I don't know why, but this feels
amazing.
different now. It's like Jeff Levy. It's like, yeah, this is
lopsided.
like, it's interesting. I think one of the things that my parents did a really good job of, that I recommend, like that I always encourage for other parents was, we had the awkward kind of conversation where they were like clear after. So let's say there was the initial where I shared with them what, my experiences, and they just held me, like you said, listen, were the Lord's ears there. But there was also a conversation, a follow-up conversation later, like I would say probably weeks, if not months later, where, especially when I started dating guys, where they were like, hey, this is like, we do need to be honest with you as Catholics. Like, we can't, like, we're not going to say that this kind of a relationship is in your best interest for your soul. Like, we did have that conversation, and it was weird. It was awkward, and it was hard for me. But I think what I really appreciate about their approach and what I would encourage is that it was, though, however, a like one and done, where it was kind of like, I knew where they stood after that conversation.
Yeah.
I didn't need to then constantly be reminded that they thought I was in a sinful relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think where I find that some parents will come to me with is like, they're like, I don't get why my kid doesn't want to talk to me. I mean, every time they come to my dinner table, I'm reminding them that they're living in a sinful like relationship. But like, I don't know why and now I'm kind of like, I mean, would you like it if like every time you sat with someone, they were like, hey, just a reminder, like, you're actively
big sinner.
sinning.
You big
right.
sinner.
It's like, I think it's well intended. I don't want to at all put off, like, there's a lot of, that's a complex, like, I can't imagine a parent's heart in that. But at the same time, I'm really thankful that my parents, it was kind of like, all right, I knew where they stood.
Yeah.
That was it. If I had questions, I knew I could go to them. I didn't. I was like, so it was like, I think that is one thing I would give to parents of like, if it does get to a point where like your kid like shares or let's say they've like decided they're leaving the church or whatever, and you feel the need to share where you stand as Catholics, I think it's important to have a conversation about that rooted in prayer and honesty and truth and love. But then like, I don't know how necessary it is to then constantly be reiterating over and over again that same point you already made.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I would say.
No, that's a healthy reminder. And I think, I mean, it's kind of a reminder for all of us in terms of any difficult conversations, right? Where you kind of make your point, but then if you keep doing it, it might be more for my own sake, right, than it is for actually helping the other person.
Totally.
Right? Because I feel uncomfortable, so I feel like I have to say this again, right? And I'm not saying that's invalid. That feeling can be a valid discomfort depending on whatever the situation is. But just to remember, okay, well, if I'm going to love this person, part of it is telling the truth, but part of it is also maybe in the same way that the Father, allowed his son. I mean, sorry, not God the Father, but the Father of the prodigal son, right? Like allows his son. It's like, all right, if this is what you want, like I'll let you go this road, but I'm also eager for you to come back into the fullness, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's a balance.
It's so much easier for us to say this, but then when it's your kid, I like also sit with parents who are like weeping and lamenting over the fact that their kid isn't in church.
And to only say it once, you're like, is there anything else I can do? Is there anything else I can do?
I think another thing that I guess I will say, like to maybe caveat to that and kind of like add on another is I will say my parents also did a good job though of like, I still felt post that conversation, post all those conversations, I still felt they were still invested they were still invested in me as a human person. Because another kind of, I'm responding to all this based off of almost like as a response to horror situations I've heard on the flip end, where like it's not gone right, or like things I wouldn't recommend is like, or then it becomes, this is all, like this is now, again, we're almost hypocritical as Catholics. We're sitting here like, like we're all beloveds at the end of the day. We all are like, that's our core identity. But then at the same time, when somebody shares with you their experience, then you're like, oh, now they're just my gay kid. And this is all like, I can't, they're gay and I can't talk to them about anything because all they are is gay and they just want, and we almost like contradict ourselves. Where it's like, well, aren't they?
That's an aspect of your life right now.
Yeah, you're out here saying they're a whole human person.
Right.
You're so, like, you hear this all the time from Catholics that you're a whole human person, blah, blah, which is true. But then we don't actually take time don't walk that out. It's like, well, if they're a whole human person, if there's so many complexities to their life and their heart and who they are, then like, why aren't like invest in that? Like, why does this now have to be the thing about your kid that you need to be harking on?
Right.
And so for me, I think my parents did a really good job of like, outside of that, they just did a good job of like investing in my interests,
you're into music or into sports.
My hobbies, my like, there was still an investment in me where it was like, I still knew mom and dad cared, you know, and they liked me. Yeah. Like I heard this one thing that I thought was really powerful. It's like, you don't just want people to know that God loves them. You want people to know that God likes them, which is like true. Like God likes you. Like you're a cool you're cool. Like, and like my parents, like they thought I was cool, and it was like, that was healthy. So that's one thing I would also recommend is, like again, I know this is easy for me to say as somebody who's not a physical father, but like, nonetheless, to step into that invitational place of like, where can you invest in your kid and in your, or even like asking questions even about this, like, how has it affected your, like, especially if they haven't made a decision per se yet of like what their life path is going to look like in this realm, like being willing to ask those questions of like, how has this affected your relationship with God? Like, how do you see the church? How do you like, don't be afraid to dive into it with them. Like, if anything, I think it shows a willingness to step into that place with them and not a fear of like, oh, I don't want to talk about this with you. Cause it's like, no, like be willing to enter that with them. So.
Wow.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome.
Man, thank you for sharing all this and just sharing your heart and your wisdom.
Yeah.
I mean, it's rich.
Yeah.
It's
praise
rich.
God.
Yeah. And it's,
like the vulnerability of some of probably what were the hardest conversations, that you've had.
Yeah. No, we're honored for you to share that. And I'm sure there are going to be so many people in our audience who are just, it's going to help them to know how to maybe process some things or at least be better equipped to approach a conversation in a more constructive way. Wow.
Thank you guys. Thanks for receiving me. So.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's it for Friday. Just a lighthearted, Friday episode. But we will see you all in the multifaceted, and sometimes difficult conversations of life. And for the rest of you, we will
see you in the Eucharist.
God bless.
A story of internal conflict. Great stuff this week as the Bea-Atta Dudes, available at Podcast Central or wherever you like to stream. You can find that at ewtn.com/podcast, and then that way you can catch the rest of the conversation or shows you might have missed. I'm Ace McKay. When Catholics Coast to Coast returns, Gaudium et Spes is actually going to be talking with Dr. David C. Schleider. He is actually discussing his newest book that gives pretty much the nature of authority and the crisis of the authority in churches these days. As the culture continues, we get a chance to get some insights into how to prepare that in our faith. So more on the way with Gaudium et Spes next on Catholics Coast to Coast.
The destination for great Catholic audio programming is EWTN Podcast Central, featuring the best of EWTN radio, as well as faith-filled podcasts from our friends and affiliates across the nation, all in one place, all free. If it's central to the faith, you can find it on EWTN Podcast Central. It's like podcast heaven. Visit EWTN.com/radio/podcasts today.
Hi, everyone, and welcome again to another episode of Gaudium et Spes 22.com, Podbean podcast and YouTube video. Very pleased today to be joined by two old friends, my former colleague, my comrade in arms, Dr. Rodney Hauser, but the guest of honor tonight, I'm going to introduce first Dr. David C. Schindler, who teaches at the John Paul II Institute, Studies of Marriage and Family, Washington, D.C., Pontifical Institute. He's a professor of metaphysics and anthropology there, and PhD advisor, and probably a whole bunch of other stuff that doesn't get listed in official bios that he has to do anyway.
Take out the trash and, clean the office.
That's right. Yeah. But welcome, Dave. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Been looking forward to reconnecting with you guys.
Yeah, I want to give a big shout out The idea for this podcast came from I watched an episode of the Space Salvi Institute interview with you, Andrew Pretiprint, and my two friends, Andrew Pretiprint and Bobby Mixa. That's a great podcast, the Space Salvi podcast. But they did a podcast with you on a book that you're writing. And I thought, yes, I want to interview David about this as well. And the book you are writing is on the crisis, the nature of authority and the crisis of authority in our culture today. And I thought, yeah, Rodney sent me before we went on here an article by Carlo Lancelotti on Del Noce's approach, Augusta Del Noce's approach to authority in Humanum that I thought was excellent. So I really have, because I'm at a loss. I don't know what you've written in your book. Normally, when I interview a guest, I will have read their article or their book or whatever. So I'm just going to turn it over to you, Dave, and say I've seen the interview with the Space Salvi people, but I don't want to just parrot that, obviously. So I want to turn it over to you and say, okay, so what is this book about? Why did you write it? The whole bit.
Yeah, yeah, no, thank you. It's funny. This is the last thing that I would have thought, imagined that I'd be writing. I mean, for a number of reasons. Even my venturing audaciously into the field of political philosophy is a surprise for me, given my interests were almost exclusively in metaphysics and philosophical anthropology. But for a variety of reasons, I came to understand, partly through my wife, who's a political philosopher. When we got married, I used to make fun of her interests, but she managed to persuade me about the importance. And then also, I mean, oddly, reading Hegel, if you can believe it, I came to see. I always thought politics had to do with. There you go. I always thought politics had to do with just making compromises, sort of pragmatic solutions, and that there was nothing really intellectually um, satisfying about thinking about politics. It's just something you do because you have to. But I came to realize that that's not true at all, and I've come increasingly to realize that in fact I've always been interested in it. I just didn't know that that's what I was interested in. I had conceded too much to a modern conception of what politics is about, and I didn't realize that it really is about the realization of the meaning of being. It's one of the most fundamental disclosures of the meaning of reality that kind of sets the horizon for everything else. So one of the first books that I wrote was on Plato's Republic, and I mentioned in passing there that it's an odd coincidence, just state of affairs, that Plato happens to present his most robust account of his own metaphysics precisely in a book on political philosophy. I just thought that was a curious sort of accident, but I've come to realize that that's absolutely crucial to understanding what the Republic is all about. And so that's sort of the background. Part of the argument is to try to communicate then this idea that authority is not just a practical matter about keeping order and policing things and kind of managing. In the very first place, what I argue in the book is that authority is not in the first place in the order of the good, and not even in the first place in the order of the true, although that's already something worth thinking about. But it's most fundamentally in the order of the beautiful. And when you see that and connect it to the theme of beauty in Balthazar, that in a certain sense it's the one that opens the horizon within that already engages our mind at a fundamental level, and engages our disposes us at a fundamental level that enables us to think and to act properly. So it enables us to enter into the order of the true and the order of the good. It comes first, and it's primordial, and it's what sets the horizon. So
It
that's the
breathes
goal.
fire. It breathes fire into the equation of the true and
Yeah,
the good.
yeah, nicely put. That's exactly right. So it operates really at that fundamental level, which is why, political speech needs to be poetic in that sort of way. But
Yeah.
needs the rhetoric actually. I've come to see that rhetoric actually is a much more interesting reality. But so all that as a preliminary point being said, it has become evident to me that the loss of a sense of authority, sort of the crisis of authority that we experience all over the place in the family, in schools, and in the political order. Um, this is more profoundly connected to the crisis of meaning. The that people talk about, the meaning crisis that John Paul II talks about, that John Vervaeke talks about. Uh, the nihilism that has was threatening authority is what Nietzsche most lamented. Actually, I mean, that was mind blowing when that occurred to me. We think of him as kind of a rebel, but I think really ultimately what he wanted was to recover some sense of authority. That's what the will to power is about. But it's all compensation for a loss of authority. So anyway, that's a very long answer. I mean, I could go on and on, but I'll just leave it there.
Well, I'll turn it over. That's great. That's what I remember that when you began your conversation with Bobby Mixa on the Space LV thing, that you still weren't certain what the title of the new book is going to be or the publisher.
Yeah. No, and I'm waiting to hear back from a publisher. I've been waiting a long time. But I'd rather not say until that gets resolved. But the title, at least the proposed title, is Authority and Its Counterfeits.
Yeah.
And then the subtitle, I think, is probably going to get some pushback on. But the one I have now is A Political, Poetical, Philosophical, and Theological Theory. So I'm trying to get at the nature of authority in terms of language, in terms of metaphysics, in terms of thinking, and also in terms of God and the church relationship to the political order.
Very
So
good.
basically, and part of the argument is that one of the reasons we've one of this maybe symptoms of a loss of a sense of authority is the fact that we've separated all these things from each other.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Rodney. Because Rodney, you sent me that very interesting article, which I speed read right before this thing from Carlo Ancelotti, where he talks about Del Noce's concept of the relationship between authority and power, and actually to the etymology with us. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that and then segue into discussing that with Dave.
Yeah, I think that might be a good place to kind of jump off a little bit, is the kind of knee-jerk reaction that the average. So it's interesting if you think about it, right? If we do the kind of the history, if we did a genealogy of what has happened to authority, it'd be kind of interesting, right? Because already in Luther, there's a little bit of an aversion, right? And then by the time you get to the Enlightenment, let's get rid of our self-imposed tutelage, right? You get that kind of talk.
That's right.
And then, but what's interesting is today it's trickled down to the man on the street, right? Who has a knee-jerk of, when you say the word authority, it doesn't make somebody, get goosebumps or anything. It's a knee-jerk kind of like, oh, gross, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And so I guess how does that happen?
Just a little anecdote is I was giving a lecture at a university which will go unnamed, but they the person organizing it asked me to take the word authority out of the title because he said no one will show up to your talk.
Yeah. So maybe just talk a little bit about that. Like how has the word authority gotten tarnished, and maybe what does that have to do with its relationship to power, maybe?
Yeah, so I mean, to say that authority is connected to beauty means that it's a kind of a revelation of there's a magnificence and dignity, and the idea is this is something that Bobby and I discussed with Spes Alvi. He alluded to a footnote that I have about referring to Friedrich Schiller, the noble personality is able to, in a way, through the radiance of his personality, bring out the dignity of all, even inanimate things around him. Everything takes on a kind of a dignity. And it seems to me that that's the basic role that authority plays. It's related to the word augment, to enhance or augment, augere, to make increase,
to grow,
exactly, to amplify. And the fundamental role of authority is precisely to cause the growth, bring about the growth, and to elevate the dignity of everything that's around him. So I mean, the thing is, a really sort of concrete instance of this. Think about what the king meant in the Lord of the Rings. And it's not that you want somebody who's calling the shots. It's more than just a leader. There's something about the mission of the king, and the fact that this is an inheritance of a long tradition. There's a whole sort of mythology that comes along with it, and raises the dignity of those around him. I mean, you think of the scene where what's his name from the who had just sacrificed his life to save the hobbits. Anyway, he sort of professes his allegiance to the king there, and you see how meaningful that event is. Okay, so that's this
Boromir.
Thank you, Boromir. Exactly. That's the sense of this radiance of a kind of dignity that I think authority ultimately means, which not only inspires action as we think of it, but I think it actually opens your mind to be able to think properly about things. That's a dimension I think we tend to overlook, the kind of intellectual side of things. But when it gets impoverished and reduced to a police function, basically, then it's nothing. There's nothing inspiring about it. It's just something that you want to evade. You want to try to do as much as you can without calling the attention of.
Well, the character of Boromir is actually a very interesting analogy here, because Boromir was very tempted by power. He wanted the ring, he wanted its power, and was constantly wanting to grasp at it. And yet, at the end of the day, he understood that his true authority was a moral and spiritual authority.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
he sacrificed his life for the hobbits, in their noble cause to actually get rid of the ring.
Yeah, no, isn't that interesting? And it's when he sort of sacrificed, right, that kind of self-protective power, that he
Yes.
actually became an authoritative figure himself,
Yes.
but coincided with his recognition of this authority above him. And that's the thing about authority, has this recognition of something above you that then actually becomes effectively present in you. By your recognition, you radiate authority yourself.
And not to dwell on this, but at the very end, when in the Return of the King, when Aragorn is crowned king, the three hobbits who have essentially saved Middle Earth kneel before Aragorn, and he lifts them up, and then he kneels in front of them and says, "You kneel before no man."
Yeah, isn't that?
Which shows that he understood
Yeah,
the moral character of authority as something that transcended himself.
and notice, one might sort of from a more modern perspective say, "Oh, no, he's telling them not to kneel," and so he's actually removing the hierarchy of authority. But just imagine if the hobbits were to say, "No, I'm not kneeling before you, because we're
Well,
equal."
that's the whole point. That's the point.
It's precisely that they kneel first.
Yeah.
That then the dignity of his lifting them beyond that.
That's right. That's right. Aragorn wasn't saying, "Hey, dudes, authority blows chunks, so stop doing this." All right.
Right. Yeah. No, it's a totally different thing, and that brings up the difference between authority and power.
Yeah.
Power is always going to be implied by authority, but if you take power out of the context of authority, it becomes very different. It's no longer. I mean, notice we were just saying that Aragorn's authority enhances and elevates the authority of the hobbits.
Yes.
But power doesn't work that way.
Right.
If you have power, then the existence of power in anything other than you is kind of a threat to your power. There's a sort of mutual exclusivity about power that that just changes everything. And this is why we experience power as oppressive,
Yeah.
and why then, in an age where we've lost any sense of authority, we think that authority simply means people who are allowed to have power,
Right.
allowed for whatever reason. And there's nothing inspiring, exciting about that. And you want to minimize it as far as possible.
Yeah. I mean, can I just interject a couple of things that have come to mind as you guys are talking about this, because it's so interesting. I mean, you think about the ministry of Jesus is so fascinating when you start asking the question of authority and then thinking about the Gospels.
Yeah.
Because there's lots of references. I mean, people are amazed that he teaches with such authority, right? But it's very clear that in this incarnate state, Jesus is so deferent to the Father.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you're trying to fight Arianism, it can almost be inconvenient, because he's like, the Father is greater than I am, and why do you call me good? Only the Father is good, right? But I think the importance there is precisely him teaching that you gain authority. He didn't deny that he taught with authority.
Yeah.
He didn't say, no, I don't teach with authority. He didn't deny that he taught, but his authority precisely comes from the fact that he is submissive to something that he has to be faithful to.
Right.
Which is so interesting, right?
No, it is. I mean, just imagine that, simply giving a speech, a kind of charismatic speech.
Yeah.
That would have been a very different sort of thing. But notice he teaches with authority. What is he teaching? He's actually explaining scripture.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, there's simultaneously a deference to the Father above him and to the tradition that precedes him.
Yes.
And those things are inseparable. One of the arguments I make in this book is the inseparability of that authority is expressed in the interrelation of the priest, the prophet, and the king.
Oh, interesting.
And
Wow.
they're all particular expressions of authority that are not reducible to the others, but they require each other. And if you have a king who rejects the priest or who rejects the prophet, suddenly it's no longer authority we're talking about, it's power.
Yeah.
And so forth. I mean, you can see, if you have the priest without the king, you have a private faith. I mean, you could riff on this forever, actually. It's really quite a rich theme once you break it open.
Right. And then one other thought I had that in a totally different vein than Jesus, I was thinking a little bit about like how jazz music works, right? And you get
From Jesus to jazz.
So first of all have a musical form that begins to like demonstrate that it's tapped into something.
Yeah.
It's not just worthless. It's not just pandering to, for money or whatever, that it's serious in some level. And then you get a generation, or a series, I should say, of giants who have authority in the thing, the Monk and Miles and Ellington and Bird, like the big legends. And I was thinking about the fact that there's a story where Coltrane has kind of hit rock bottom, his drug addiction.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and he gets kicked out of the Miles Davis Quintet and all this stuff. And he's at a place. He's at a bad place, but he's at a club list, and he sees Monk on stage playing.
Yeah.
And he realizes that Monk has really tapped into something even better than he has. That Monk is a genius in some sense, that he is not there yet.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys know this, but he actually moved in with Monk after that. He went up to him afterwards and he goes, I want to come under your tutelage, so to speak, or whatever. And he spent a year, I think, at least in Monk's house, Monk teaching him the thing. And it's just, it's the opposite of Monk having any kind of power over Coltrane.
Yeah.
It's that Coltrane from within wants what Monk has, and Monk has the authority to give it to him.
Right.
And so but it's because Monk himself is under this thing.
Right. That's right.
He's a servant to it in a way, right?
Right.
So that's kind of how authority works.
That's really
in
nice.
any field. Yeah.
Yeah. Something like this would be sort of the prophet, the category of the prophet, as I was, and and the thing that's really beautiful and interesting about that is, it's what an authority does is Bobby liked this line that I quoted in this essay that's going to be published in Communio, by the way. In our authority issue in Communio, I've got a single essay kind of encapsulation of some of this stuff. But there's a purely secular intellectual historian who's written some of the most interesting things about authority. His name is Krieger, and he one of the definitions he gives, or one of the descriptions that he gives, is that authority is a kind of transitional concept that translates higher principles into the kind of present practical circumstances, and that the authority figure is the one who mediates between these universal, timeless principles and the reality that we live in. So connects, you might say, time and eternity. This is something Del Noce is really excellent at. This is one of his main themes. But you see that there's Coltrane had the sense in Monk that he's tapped into a higher order, and somehow, I mean, one can get a little woo-woo here with this, but there's kind of a channeling of something, of a kind of an insight, or a perception of an order that then is getting translated very concretely into this music. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing, and it's why people are moved by the music.
Right. It's a very specific thing, but it has a universal appeal because we're all potentially tapping into the same.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. So we can have access to it, but our access then, I mean, that's one of the things that's so amazing about this. It really is mediated through others.
Right.
I mean, this is the problem that Luther had. For him, it had to be just me and God privately, rather than recognizing that. And that's a loss of authority. And he was in the nominalist vision that is essentially God reinterpreted in terms of power, and no longer really in terms of authority. And so there's built into it, always the flip side. On the one hand, rebellion then against institutional structures on the one hand, then on the other hand, a complete capitulation to them. In terms of the civil authorities, we give absolute deference to civil authorities.
Well, as we saw with the peasant war.
No, exactly. It's so whenever you break the mediation, you never collapse in one direction. You always collapse in both at the same time.
Right.
Which is pretty interesting.
Little piece of jazz trivia, Hauser. You'll be happy to know this. Jazz, believe it or not, was Lawrence Welk's favorite form of music.
Oh.
Can you believe that? The Mr. Champagne music, Mr. 1950s,
I didn't know you were a Lawrence Welk fan, Larry.
I wasn't. I saw that on a little documentary I was watching on the history of jazz, and it was just a little vignette on how it influenced so many people that you would not expect to be influenced by jazz. And one of them was actually Lawrence Welk, who loved jazz. But
my parents watched the show.
One of America's contributions to world culture.
Absolutely.
That and barbecue. Yeah.
That and barbecue. Yeah. So that, among many other things, this Negroni that I'm drinking because of my head cold is loosened my tongue a bit. So I have to be I have to be a little more cautious than usual. Yeah. Because I could talk about some other things America is exported to the world these days that I won't go into. But anyway, I like your concept there of mediation, Dave, because I mean, going back to Luther, I mean, one of the things that you notice is as the Reformation unfolds, you can image the Reformation as just this cacophony of just things just shatter and splinter like a broken mirror or broken glass, and it's just everywhere and it makes no sense. But actually, there is a logic to it. As the Reformation unfolds, it becomes less and less and less sacramental, less and less and less institutional. As the Reformation proceeds, I mean, Luther remained kind of still sort of Catholic in so many ways. And yet every disagreement that comes after Luther, based on the principles he himself established, was like, dude, you don't understand the full revolution you've unleashed here.
The Nature of Authority, great stuff from Gaudium et Spes. You want the full conversation or ones you might have missed, you can always go back, check it out at ewtn.com/podcast, and then you're in the mecca of what is all Podcast Central. So don't miss out, and then stream wherever you are. That way you don't miss future episodes. I'm Ace McKay, bugging out. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Remember to let God define who you are, and I'll see you again with Catholics Coast to Coast.